Hi, I'm Pam, and today I'm going to be ranking some video games. It's been a while since I've made one of these ranking videos, and the subgenre or genre I've decided to do today is the roguelite. Not to be confused with the roguelike, which is actually very confusing. This is a genre named after the video game Rogue, which came out for the first time in 1980. This is a turn-based dungeon crawler using very simple grid-based ASCII art as you go through a dungeon, fighting monsters, and if you die forever and you need to start the entire game back from the beginning. Now, I don't think I'm as pedantic as a lot of people when it comes to this particular subgenre of video games, but I will give you my definition for it so you can tell if I'm making sense to you. I think the main thing about roguelikes is that they are a run-based game. So you try to get through the game in one run, and when you die, you're dead permanently and you have to start back from the beginning again. These games also include some random or procedurally generated elements, and this could be both the map that you're exploring, changing from run to run, or the upgrades that you're getting on each run changing. The thing that differentiates a roguelike from a roguelite is that a roguelite has some kind of meta progression. You're not starting completely from scratch after every death, but there is some sort of power-up system or unlockables that you get as you go through each run that you can then carry forward onto your next runs. A lot of games have roguelite elements, but I think that the main genre can be really anything. It can be an action game, it can be a platformer, it can be a deck builder, or it can even be more narrative focused. I will say that I am probably tougher on this genre than most people might be. I have a number of games that I've really enjoyed, but overall, the idea of having to do something over and over again to get to the end is a little bit repetitive, and it needs to have a really good hook in order for me to want to do that. A lot of the times I'll see a new game trailer and think, ooh, is that a new Metroidvania? Oh no, it's a roguelite. And I do still end up liking some of these games, but it isn't a genre that really pulls me in. It needs to really sell itself to me for me to enjoy it. Alright, so I've got my tier maker list up here. I think I have 38 games that I'm going to be ranking today. Some of them fit the genre a little better than others. I'll sort of discuss that as I go along with them, and I'll be going through them alphabetically because that's how I like to do it. Starting with the top of the list, we have Balatro, which is a game which just came out in 2024. This is developed by Local Thunk, and this is a poker-themed deck builder. It's based upon poker hands, but you get way more than 5 or 7 cards. As you go, you're building various hands, and the big thing here is that you're getting jokers, and jokers can add multipliers to your hand, and you're trying to just get ridiculous high scores as you go through the game. You play through a number of antes. You need to get through 8 of them in order to get to the end, and as you go, you can unlock new jokers, which will then show up for later runs as you play. This is a very flashy casino type game, lots of just big numbers and satisfying sound effects and cool little effects on the cards. I think this is a game that is more addictive than it is fun, personally. I played it for about, 4 hours. I beat my first run and decided I didn't really need to play anymore. There's all sorts of challenges. You can play with different colored decks, which have different aspects to them. You can go forward to try to unlock all the jokers. You can go past the 8th ante and just get ridiculous numbers that kind of break the game, and it's just, that part didn't appeal to me. I just wanted to get my one win and then call it quits because I was really seeing it as more addictive than actual fun, but it was a good few hours that I had with this game, so I'm gonna give Balatro a B. Next up is Brotato. This is a 2022 game by Blobfish, and this is sort of a top-down auto battler. I'm not sure exactly what this subgenre is called, but basically You play a potato, there's a number of them you can choose from with different attributes, and as you go, you basically are just going through a square. The whole level's just a square, and you're walking around it. He's automatically shooting from whatever weapons he has, and enemies are spawning, and you're just avoiding enemies as much as you can while you're picking up little pickups and things. And then between levels, you can level up. So you can decide to buy little accessories that increase attributes, you can get new weapons, you can level up your weapons, and you're just going through this game constantly upgrading what you have, and then going and just walking around this square and trying not to get hit. The upgrade part is the best part of the game. The actual playing is very, very dull. There's really not much to it, so I'm going to give Brotato a C. Children of Morta is a 2019 game by Dead Mage, and this is an isometric action RPG with a pretty big focus on narrative. You play as a whole family of characters, and you go from your house, where you see little story bits for each character and sort of what's going on in the world, and then you pick one of the characters to delve into the dungeon with, and you go through a kind of like Diablo-style ARPG dungeon dive where you're fighting enemies, finding enemies. There are little events that you can come across in the dungeon, and you're trying to get as far into the dungeon as you can before you die, and then once you die, you go back to the house, get a little bit more story, manage to level up your character a little bit, and rinse and repeat and do it again. I really like Children of Morta. I think the pixel art is absolutely gorgeous. I think it also does a very good job of balancing the action and the story. I never felt like it was too cutscene heavy, but it was just giving me little glimpses of the story between every more action-focused dungeon dive, and I really appreciated that. The combat and everything is very solid, so I'm going to give Children of Morta the first A. Next up is Cobalt Core, and this came out in 2023 from Monogame. This is a space-themed deck builder. You go out in your spaceship, you have a few different characters who use different colored decks, and as you go, you're fighting other spaceships, getting new cards, and building a deck. It's sort of randomly selected, so you can sort of pick where you want to go, if you want to go fight this guy, if you want to go to the repair shop, or maybe an event. And this is kind of like Into the Breach, which more people probably know than this, except a little more complicated, but it is one where every move during combat is telegraphed. So you know exactly what your enemy is going to do, and you know exactly what cards you have and what they do. So it is a very strategic kind of game as opposed to more of a luck or random-based game, at least in the combat itself. Overall, I really thought this was a good game. It didn't quite get its hooks in me as much as something like Into the Breach, but it's an interesting one if you like that kind of deck builder that is very strategic and tactical. I would give this one a B. Cult of the Lamb is by Massive Monster. It came out in 2022. And this combines dungeon delving action, sort of a top-down perspective, with base building. You're basically building a cult around you. You're gathering followers. While you're in your base, you're telling them what to do, giving them little jobs to make food or do sacrifices, or you can sacrifice them, and then you're going into the dungeon, getting as far as you can, and then sort of upgrading yourself based on what's happening in your base later. I didn't think Cult of the Lamb is a particularly great dungeon delver or a particular great base builder. Everything about it was just kind of eh. So I'm gonna give Cult of the Lamb a C. Darkest Dungeon is a game I've always had a bit of a love-hate relationship with because it's just so mean. This first came out in 2015 by Red Hook Studios, and this is turn-based dungeon crawling as well as base building. I feel like this one is slightly on the side of less roguelite Roguelite than a number of others on this list. You're building your base, and that stays built up. I mean, unless you really screw it up. That stays built up, but then you have parties of characters who you're sending into the dungeon, and what happens to them depends on how well you play during the turn-based combat, but they can die, they can get super stressed out, they can get like psychological ailments based on all of the stress that they're going through. You can have a full party wipe and then those characters are gone forever, but you can always go back to town and recruit new characters to play more. And as much as I say love-hate, I've played so much of this game, and I actually really like it. I love the turn-based combat, I love the art style, I really like building up the town and opening up new things like the blacksmith and the church and getting new characters with new classes and everything. I think this is very, very good, and I kind of want to play it again now. I'm giving Darkest Dungeon an A. Dead Cells is a game from 2018 by Motion Twin and Evil Empire, and this is a 2D action platformer that is absolutely amazing. This might have been one of the first roguelites that I played. Probably not the first, but close to it. You basically play a guy, he wakes up in a dungeon, and you need to go through the dungeon fighting enemies, picking up pickups that can give you new weapons and new abilities, and then choosing your way through this dungeon. So you might go out from the dungeon to a forest, or you might go out to the ramparts. So there's different ways through the dungeon, which is really cool, but it's always randomized each time in terms of like where rooms are, where upgrades are, there's bosses to fight. This is just amazing because it plays so well. Like just the moment-to-moment gameplay of like jumping and dodging and hitting things and dropping traps and them doing ranged attacks and crossbow bolts. It's just so satisfying. Each of the levels is really fun to explore so that you can get all the little upgrades that are available to you. The enemies are really interesting looking. The boss fights are cool and challenging. I think Dead Cells is definitely one of the best in this genre, so it's getting an S. Death Road to Canada is one that I actually just played recently. It first came out in 2016 by Rocket Cat Games and Mad Garden, and this is an action RPG, but with a big focus on narrative and decision making. You can play it on your own, or you can play it co-op with up to 4 players. You each pick a character, and you're basically in a car driving to Canada because the rest of the world has been taken over by zombies and Canada is the last safe place. So you're going through, and as you're driving, you get certain events like, oh, the car broke down, should someone try to fix it? Or there's a bee in the car, what should we do? And so you make your decisions. The results can be rather random in terms of what happens based on those decisions, and then you eventually get to an area where you can pick a place, and then you go and you have to fight zombies. So you're basically doing a supply run, going through houses and stores, picking up all the materials that you can, fighting the zombies, trying not to be killed by the zombies, and then you use those materials like food and gas and ammo in order to continue on your journey. And I had an absolutely fantastic time playing this couch co-op with my partner, and it was just really fun. The little events that happen are very amusing. The gameplay itself is just, serviceable, but it's those little narrative elements and the exploration and the finding things that really makes this game stand out. We finally beat it after a number of hours we put into it, but I'd probably play this again, just because every run is so different and it's a lot of fun. So I'm going to give Death Road to Canada an A. Next up is Enter the Gungeon. This was developed in 2016 by Dodge Roll, and this is a sort of bullet hell type dungeon crawler. Everything is gun themed. You get access to a bunch of guns. All the enemies are guns or bullets or something gun related. You're going through this dungeon, fighting monsters, getting upgrades, opening chests if you've got the keys for them, getting your health back, getting screen clears, whatever you can do. This one is pretty challenging, actually. Like, I really like the gameplay, I played this first on stream a while back, and I think one of my very first runs on stream is still the best run I've ever had. Like, I still haven't actually beat Enter the Gungeon. You can also play this at least couch co-op, and I think it's actually a little bit harder couch co-op, but overall this was just a really fun game. The movement's nice, the sort of bullet hell aspect is exciting, so I'm also going to give Enter the Gungeon an A. Flame in the Flood is a 2015 game by the Molasses Flood, and this is all about survival and resource management with a bit of combat. You play a girl and her dog who are going down the river on their boat, just trying to survive. You go down the river, you stop off at wilderness areas, you explore, you look for resources, you get into combat. There's characters to meet who may want something from you or be able to help you. And then once you're ready, you get back on your boat and go off to the next area. So the path you're taking is kind of random. What's happening on each run is kind of random. As you go and you gain resources, you can also craft things, so you can upgrade your boat, you can create traps or shelters or things like that. Overall, this was pretty fun. The actual moment-to-moment gameplay isn't my absolute favorite, but I really do like the sort of survival and resource management aspect of it, so I'm going to give The Flame and the Flood a B. FTL, which is Faster Than Light, was made in 2012, and it is by Subset Games. And this is a spaceship management and survival game, and sadly one that I've never really been able to get into. You start off on a ship, it's got cute little pixel graphics, you've got a couple different crewmates, and you assign them various jobs on your ship. As you go, chances are someone's going to shoot you down, or an asteroid's going to hit you, or a fire's going to break up, and your ship is going to explode. At least that was my entire experience with the game. I know that a lot of people really like this. I found this one just too punishing for me to really want to spend much time with it. Like, my ship never survived for long enough for me to really get into the game, so I'm going to give Faster Than Light a C. Next up is Gunfire Reborn. This is a 2021 game by Duoe Games. This is a first-person shooter where you play as one of several animals. You can play this online co-op. This is one that my Wednesday co-op group tried for a little while. Sadly, we all found it pretty boring. It just, you go first-person through a dungeon where everything looks kind of the same, fighting enemies, picking up upgrades. We didn't really find much here for any of us to like, really, so we gave up on this one fairly quickly, so Gunfire Reborn is getting a D. Next up is Hades, which came out in 2020 from Supergiant. I love Supergiant, and I'm sure this is many people's favorite roguelite game. If you don't know, it's an action RPG. You play Zagreus, the son of Hades, and he is trying to make it out of hell to find his mother. And as he goes, he has to fight a bunch of, the undead, the minions of Hades, and he can pick from different weapons to use. Each room he goes through, he gets a choice of 2 different boons, maybe sometimes 3 different boons, from one of the gods on Olympus, makes his way through. When he finally dies, goes back to the House of Hades, and can use certain things he collected to upgrade himself to be a little bit stronger on the next run. And all along the way, there's also an amazing narrative with fantastic voice acting. The music, as always, is absolutely fantastic. Now you might ask, Pam, that sounds like an S. It's not quite an S for me because there's too much Hades, I found. I thought it was fun to fight Hades once, and then it was alright to fight Hades 10 times to get the real ending, but there's still so much extra story that I haven't been able to experience yet, and I've wanted to progress all of the stories of all the other gods and all of the other characters, but I just never want to go in that dungeon again in my entire life. So I felt like the balance there was not great. Like, there's too much story for the amount of gameplay. Like, they needed to cut something down because I just got so sick of it. But it's a great game. If they would just let me see the rest of the story without having to do the dungeon for the 100th time, I would love that, but they didn't, so it gets an A. Next up is Hand of Fate, and this is a 2015 game by Defiant Development. We also have Hand of Fate 2, which is a 2017 game by the same developer. And this is I think these are really neat ones. They're a combo between action, RPG, and kind of a deck builder. You start the game and you're across the way from the sort of dealer, the dungeon master, and he's building a dungeon out of cards, and you go through these various locations. Some of them you go and it'll be a fight, so you'll be a third-person action person and you just have to fight a bunch of enemies. Sometimes there'll be some little event, like you have to make a decision or you have to solve a little puzzle. Sometimes you'll go to a place and there's just traps everywhere and you need to avoid the traps and take as little damage as possible. And so you're just trying to make it all the way through this sort of card-based dungeon as you go. And I really enjoy these. I think these are very neat games. I like the sort of mix of things that you're doing in them, sort of building the deck and doing the action and having the little events. I think Hand of Fate's going to get a B, as it's a game I really enjoyed, but it wasn't like the best in terms of combat. There was like a couple little like sort of glitchy things in it. Hand of Fate 2 is going to get an A because I felt like it just took the first one and improved on it in a number of ways. But yeah, if you haven't played either of these, I do recommend them. Heroes of Hammerwatch is a 2018 game by Crackshell, and this is an action dungeon crawler and base builder in one. This is another one that I played on my Wednesday co-op night. You can play it online with up to 4 players. You basically start out in a town, you go down into the dungeon where you fight enemies, avoid traps, and get materials that will let you upgrade your town, which will then let you upgrade your character as well. And I wasn't a huge fan of this. One of my biggest complaints is that everything's very tiny. Like, the camera's so zoomed out that it's kind of hard to see anything. The other problem I had was that even though you can play this co-op, you're really only building up one person's town, so only their iron or whatever they're collecting counts for upgrades. The rest of the other 3 players don't really get to use their upgrades unless they leave the game and go back to their own town. So that kind of bothered me. It was just an okay game. None of us really wanted to stick with it until we got to the end. It was also seemed fairly long for a run, so I'm going to give Heroes of Hammerwatch a C. Next up is Into the Breach, which is a 2018 game by Subset Games, and this is a turn-based strategy. You play or you control a series of pilots who pilot mechs, and monsters are coming to the city and you have to defend against them. This is a turn-based tactical game that is very strategic, like I was mentioning before. Everything is telegraphed, so your enemies' moves are telegraphed. You know exactly what your moves can do, so you have to strategically make decisions on how to solve the cities. The actual maps are very small little maps, but you go through and you have to fight the enemies, you have to protect buildings. As you go, you can level up the pilots of the mechs that you're playing to give them more abilities and make them stronger. And when a run ends, I believe you're able to carry one pilot on to the next run to sort of make you a little bit stronger for that. There's different sets of mechs that you can choose from. Overall, this is a really fun game. I really like the sort of tactical element of it and how, you really just need to use your brain and you can tell how every fight is going to go. But I think Into the Breach is great, so it gets an A. Next up, it's one of my favorite games. It's Kingdom New Lands, which is a 2015 game by Licorice and Noyo. And this is a super minimal survival resource management game. You play a king who comes to this land and he has to build it up. So you get subjects, you give them jobs, you can make them builders or archers, you build up towers to defend your kingdom, and every night you're attacked by the Greed, which are these monsters that come out of portals and just mindlessly attack you until the sun comes up. And you need to make sure that you've built up enough defenses. During the day, you go out, you collect things, you can find areas where you can buy into them to give you certain buffs or open up new kinds of buildings and things. It's very minimalistic. The game doesn't really tell you how to play. You just kind of have to figure it out yourself. And it's this amazing blend of chill, because what you're doing is fairly low effort, but also very stressful every night when you're being attacked. And you have fairly little control over whether or not your walls fall and you lose the game. Now, as I'm thinking about this, I think this is actually more on the rogue-like side than roguelite, because I don't think you actually get to carry anything over if you lose your crown and you lose your run. I think you just have to start back from the beginning again. But regardless, I absolutely love this game. I could play it over and over and over, and I have, and so this is getting an S. Loop Hero is a 2021 game by 4 Quarters, and this is a combination of deck builder, base builder, idle game. It's a strange one. You end up in this place and you have just a loop, and your character walks through this loop, and as you're going, you're getting tiles. So you can get like forest tiles, which have certain elements to them, or road tiles, or rock tiles, and so you're building up all of these resources so that you can upgrade your camp between runs. But in terms of the actual gameplay, your character just walks and then auto battles and then walks and then auto battles, and it's incredibly dull. I tried to get into this. I streamed it for a little bit. I just found it very boring. So Loop Hero gets a D. Monster Train is a 2022 game by Shiny Shoe, and this is a deck building game. I thought this one was pretty interesting. You are on a train, and it's got, I think, 3 levels, and you use your deck to place monsters on whichever level of the train, because your train is going to be attacked by other monsters. So the cards are basically battling themselves on the train, so you need to not only play the right cards, but also place them in the correct position so that they can defend the train from these monsters you're going through. And as you go, you're basically just charting your way through this map, getting into different fights, little events, places where you can do upgrades, things like that. I thought Monster Train was a pretty decent game. I didn't play it overly much. Like, once I got my 1 win, I was kind of finished with it, but I still really enjoyed the time I had with it, so that is getting a B. Mythforce came out in 2023, and it was developed by Beamdog. This is a co-op sort of first-person dungeon crawler action RPG. It has an absolutely amazing art style. It looks like an 80s cartoon, like He-Man or She-Ra. You've got different characters. You've got a paladin and a rogue and a mage, and I forget what the 4th one was, but you're basically just going through dungeons, fighting monsters. Every level you get through, you get to pick an upgrade for your character, and then when your run ends, you have a base where you can further upgrade your character, get new weapons, become more powerful, things like that. It all sounds good, but unfortunately, it has a lot of negative aspects. First of all, very repetitive. I think there's only really 3 different kinds of environments. There's very few enemy types. You're basically just doing the same thing over and over and over again. But the real problem with this was that technically it was an absolute mess. We just had so many problems playing it co-op. Sometimes the X button would stop working. Sometimes you'd choose one upgrade and it would give you the other upgrade instead. If you were in town and you clicked on the quest board, your game would just crash. Like, just a lot of persistent bugs that I have no idea how they weren't fixed before this game came out. So great visual style, interesting concept, but the execution just falls down at every point. So Mythforce gets a D. Another game that had similar problems is Necropolis, and this is a game that came out in 2016 by Harebrained Schemes. This is a third-person dungeon crawler action RPG. I played this one co-op as well. You can play with up to 4 players. You pick your character. Really, it's just a body type. I think all the characters are the same. You go through dungeons, you fight enemies, you can pick up new weapons or get some spells. There's little objectives for you to do, like take this amount of potions or res your friend this many times. I don't really know that those do much for you, but you're just going through this dungeon deeper and deeper and deeper. Similarly, everything kind of looks the same. It's not very interesting to play. The biggest problem in this is that since this is a co-op game, it makes absolutely no sense that there is friendly fire. Not just a co-op game, a melee co-op game. So none of my friends and I could ever attack the same enemy at once because we would just smack each other and kill ourselves. So that was a horrible decision on the part of this game, and it was just kind of dull, so Necropolis also gets a D. Neon Abyss came out in 2020 by Viwo Games, and this is a sort of 2D platformer, run and gun type dungeon crawler. It's, as you can tell by the game, has a very neon aesthetic. You start out in a dance club and you have to go down into the dungeon. You've got a number of characters to choose from, each of which has its own strengths and weaknesses. And you go through these dungeons finding chests which are full of crystals or keys or bombs. You use the bombs and the keys to open more chests or open more doors. You get interesting weapons. There's like a cat gun that shoots fish bones. There's guns that are just like wavy lasers. There's guns that like have a star-shaped laser just like going all around you, so you're melee attacking things. You get little eggs that can hatch into little friends who do certain things, like attack enemies or absorb a hit for you. There's just all kinds of little things to pick up as you go through the game. I had a pretty good time with this. I really like the gameplay. The sort of run and gun aspect of it is a lot of fun. It's fun to go through, and just the amount of pickups you're getting. Like sometimes you've got 20 eggs following you around as you're going. You can get to play like claw machine minigame or a fishing minigame. There's a rhythm minigame. So it's kind of always throwing new things at you. I didn't find it was enough to keep me going to the very end of the game. I beat most of the bosses, and then I got to a point where I had to do certain things to make the bosses I need spawn, and I wasn't really patient enough for that. But Neon Abyss was a fun one. I got probably a good 10 or 12 hours out of it, and I enjoyed it, so it gets a B. Oh, one downside of it was that I found the writing in it quite obnoxious. Othercide is a 2020 game by Lightbulb Crew. And this is one I was really excited about when I first saw it. If you can see by the trailer footage, this sort of whole aesthetic is definitely my kind of thing. This is a tactical turn-based strategy game. I also really like tactical turn-based strategy games, but sadly, this is one where having it be a roguelite kind of ruined the entire game for me. I liked the gameplay, I liked the turn-based combat, but it just didn't mesh well with making it run-based. The runs were too long. It felt way too punishing when you got to a point and died and have to go all the way back to the beginning. I just felt like the roguelite aspect kind of ruined this game, whereas it could have been a decent game if they had just let you continue on or let you save. I don't know, like it's really pretty, it's a cool concept, but just shouldn't have been a roguelite. So I'm gonna put this in C. PlateUp came out in 2022, was developed by It's Happening, and this is a cooking and restaurant management sim. This is one I played co-op, kind of like Overcooked, except a little less hectic. You're playing in a restaurant. The restaurant is randomly generated. You pick a recipe you want to do, so you can do pizza or burgers or I forget what else, but there's a bunch of things that you can do, but your restaurant sort of focuses on something. At the beginning, you place everything, so you place like the dishwasher and the stove and where the tables are. And so basically you need to seat guests, serve them, clean up after them. So there's definitely some coordination between you and your fellow players who are playing. And you basically just go until you get someone, I think until someone walks out on you, or maybe two people, but it doesn't take a whole lot to lose in this game. I thought this was interesting. I liked the randomness about it. I liked that when you lost a run, you generally got something new, either a new restaurant type or a new recipe that you could cook in your game. I thought it was a decent game, but like, I didn't love it. I liked it, I didn't love it, but PlateUp is going to get a B. Risk of Rain is a 2013 game by Hoppo Games? Hoppo? This is a 2D action platformer. You land on a planet. You can choose characters, although I think you might need to unlock characters. You might only know when to start. I forget. But you go down onto a planet, you explore it, you fight enemies, you gain gold, you use that gold to open chests, each of which can have a certain buff for you. The buffs can be anything from like, you can jump a second time, or your movement is faster, or you heal when you stand still. All kinds of things that you can do. You can use little upgrades, you can sort of gamble for upgrades as you go, and then eventually you need to find a teleporter, fight a big boss, and then go on to the next level. So I actually didn't play this until I had played Risk of Rain 2, but it is amazing how similar they are while being a completely different style. I haven't really been able to get into Risk of Rain 1. I like the idea of it, like the core concept is very good. I do find everything very tiny. Again, the camera is like super zoomed out for me, but it's a solid game. I'm going to put it again in that category of like, I like it, I don't love it. So Risk of Rain is getting a B. Risk of Rain 2, on the other hand, this came out in 2019, also by Hoppo Games. And this basically takes Risk of Rain and just puts it into a 3D environment. You're seeing the same kind of upgrades, the same kind of enemies, the same kind of character types, but it's all in glorious 3D. It has an amazing soundtrack. The first one had an amazing soundtrack as well, but like such a good soundtrack. You can play this co-op with up to 4 people, which is how I played it. I can't speak too much to it on single player because I didn't play a ton of it, but as a 4-player co-op game, this is one of the best games that we've played on our co-op nights. It's just a gorgeous game. It's really fun to just pile on the upgrades so that you're feeling invincible and just like projectiles are coming from you and you're self-healing and you're jumping 7 times in a row as you're going through these planets and fighting monsters. This is just a real good time. Love Risk of Rain 2. It's getting an S. Next up is Rogue Legacy. This came out in 2013 by Cellar Door Games. This is a 2D action platformer. This first game has cute pixel graphics. You're basically just going through various levels, 2D platforming, killing things with, well, it depends what class you are. That's one of the big things about this game. At the beginning, you pick a character, and they could be a warrior or a mage or a thief, various characters, and that will impact what kind of abilities and attacks they have. But they will also generally have some kind of quirk to them. So maybe they're nearsighted and the edges of the map are fuzzy, or maybe they're extra big and their character sprite is larger. It could be really anything. So you go through the map, get as far as you can, get some upgrades, go back to your castle, and you can upgrade things to open new classes or make yourself stronger in some way. And each time, the thing is that you're a legacy, so it's like the child of the character you played before, and you pick sort of again which one you want to take, which quirk they have, and you go through. I think this is a pretty good game. I liked it a lot. I played through Rogue Legacy until the end. I did think it was a very cute game. I liked the bosses. I liked exploring everything. I don't love the legacy system or the quirks you get. Like, a lot of them are visual quirks, which I just don't like looking at. But I thought Rogue Legacy was good. I did play it through to the end. The sequel is Rogue Legacy 2, which is from 2020, also from Cellar Door Games. This is a very similar game. They went away from the pixel art and made it a more cartoony art style. And I don't know. I played through, I didn't end up finishing this one, and I can't exactly tell you why. I think it was just sort of more the same without really improving much in my eyes. So I still think it's like a decent enough game, but it wasn't enough to make me want to finish it. I did end up putting it down. So Rogue Legacy 2 will get a B. Next up is Slay the Spire. This is a 2019 game by Megacrit, and this is a deck builder. You start off the game, you pick one of 4 now, 3 when I first played it, characters. You can be like a warrior tanky guy, you can be a stealthy roguey poison guy, or you can be the Defect, which is my favorite character, who gets these various orbs with different kind of effects on them. And you go building a deck, making your way through a dungeon, sort of choosing what path you want to go, if you're going to fight something, or maybe there's a treasure chest or a store or an event. And you just build up your deck. You get a new card every time you defeat enemies, as well as in other places. You unlock new things as you complete runs, and eventually you have to beat the game as all 3 of the characters and then go a little further. I didn't love Slay the Spire the first time I played it because the Defect was the only class I liked, but the more I played it, the more I loved Slay the Spire, and this is probably one of my most played games. It is like the only game I will play on my Switch in handheld mode because I don't like handhelds, but I've had so much fun with this. It's like very addictive, but also very fun. You know, there's some strategy, there's some luck. I think it's just an absolutely fantastic game, both as a deck builder and as a roguelite. So this is getting an S. Spacelines from the Far Out is a 2022 game by Coffee Knots. And this is a management sim game where you are managing an airliner. You get a ship and you're taking passengers from one end of the galaxy to another. You're sort of building up your ship. You're keeping them happy while you're flying. So you're cleaning up after them and feeding them and making sure they're entertained. This is a co-op game. I played it with 4-player co-op. And it's got a bit of that sort of overcooked thing of communicating and having to work together in a very chaotic environment. As you go, everything kind of felt very repetitive. Like each little journey, each section of the journey always kind of felt the same. I mean, sometimes you'd have more passengers or they'd be fussier than usual, but it all felt very repetitive. I also felt the game was too long. We played it right until almost the end of a run, and then our spaceship blew up, and then none of us really felt very compelled to start a new run, which kind of feels like a failing on the whole roguelite thing. So yeah, it was just a bit repetitive, and the runs were too long, and there was really nothing to keep us with this game, so this is gonna get a D. Spelunky apparently first came out in 2008. I didn't realize it was that old. I feel like there must have been a newer edition or something. Maybe not. This is developed by Mossmouth, and this is a 2D action platformer where you're going into various dungeons, fighting monsters, avoiding traps, getting to the next zone. And I might have an unpopular opinion on this one because I feel like it is a pretty popular roguelite. I haven't been able to get into this. I've tried it single player, I've tried it co-op. My issue with this game is that your character moves very fast and is very slippery, and I just really don't like that in a platformer. So as much as I tried to get into it, I just felt like controlling it wasn't at all appealing to me. Like, it looks cute. I like the idea of like traps and treasures and all this delving through crypts and things, but yeah, I just didn't like controlling this game at all, so I'm gonna give Spelunky a C. Summun Aeterna is a 2022 game from Aeternum Game Studios. This is another 2D action platformer. Aeterna Noctis is a Metroidvania by the same developers that I really liked, and this is sort of putting the roguelite spin on that game. So you're playing the same character, you're seeing some of the same enemies and abilities, but it's a completely different spin on it. Overall, I really had a lot of fun with this. The backgrounds are beautiful and quite different. There's like a gothic background and like a very nature background, icy background. I thought it was really cool. There's a bunch of different upgrades to get. There's different types of weapons that you can choose, whether you want a sword or a scythe or get what the other one is, guns, different weapons. You can level up your weapons as you go through the game. You get different abilities. You can make a deal with death or get a curse that could end your run early but could give you good rewards if you manage to break the curse. Overall, I really liked this. It's also got this cool seed system where you can sort of impact the new random seed of the game you're getting, whether it's what particular environment or the enemies being stronger or them giving you more gold, things like that. Overall, I had a good time with this. It didn't take me a ton of time to beat it for the first time, though there is still definitely a lot more to do after you beat it for the first time. I'm gonna give Summun Aeterna an 8. So next up, we have 2 narrative games, which are Sunless Sea and Sunless Skies. These were developed in 2015 and 2019 by Fail Better Games, and these are all about survival, exploration, and narrative. And they're different games, they're in different areas. So Sunless Sea, you are playing a boat captain in this very sort of creepy Lovecraftian world. You take your boat out, you're finding different islands and coming across different characters who want things from you. You're building up inventory because someone out there is going to want this inventory. You're taking passengers from place to place. You're running out of food and having to eat your crew and then getting horrible visions. It's just a really cool story. But you're basically trying to survive. There's some combat as you will find either other ships or monsters out in the deep. Sunless Skies is similar, except you're in an airship instead of a boat. But these are very good narrative games. I was thinking of giving these an A just because I really like these as games. But the more I thought about it, the more I wish that they were not roguelite and that you could just save your game and get through a run without having to be paranoid of some monster coming and destroying your ship and ending it all. So I love these games. I think the writing is absolutely top notch. I love the resource management. I love the atmosphere, but I think they would just be way, way better without permadeath. So I'm gonna give them Bs because they're very good games, but I wish they were not roguelites. That's it. So yeah, Sunless Sea and Sunless Skies, B. But this is another 2 more games that I really want to replay them now that I'm talking about them. Next up is Vampire Survivors. This is a 2021? I thought this just came out last year. Maybe just everyone found it last year or something. By Ponkel. And this is a survival auto shooter game. This is one where I'm like, is this a roguelite? I feel like every stage is the same every time, and you don't really move through the stages. You you just get through one, maybe, if death doesn't kill you immediately. I'm having like, I don't know if this belongs in this category, but I put it on the list, so we'll talk about it. You're basically one of a series of characters. You unlock new ones, you pick a level to go through, and as you go through, you level up and you get to pick an upgrade. Eventually, you can get multiple upgrades and they'll like interact in interesting ways together. But this is basically the video game equivalent of a slot machine. You don't do much other than walk while it auto shoots for you, and it's just like a pachinko machine. It's just like boo, 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 just like explosions, noises, wow, fun, dopamine. Whereas, again, it's one of those like addictive, yes, fun, not really. So I'm gonna give Vampire Survivors a C. Although I don't think it even belongs in this category, but whatever, I don't know. Argue with me in the comments. All right, we are getting close to the end here. The second last game is Void Bastards, and this is a 2020 game by Blue Manchu. This is a first-person shooter. You play a convict, and you're basically being sent out on a series of missions. You're going through random ships that you find. You go through, you fight enemies, you find upgrades, you get resources, you go back, you make a bunch of upgrades, so it's very much like a bit of a crafty resource management game at all. It's got a very cool look to it. Like, I love the sort of cell shaded and as well as the color scheme. The combat's a lot of fun. The writing, when you get to see it, is also very humorous. I liked Void Bastards a lot. I think there's a sequel, Wild Bastards, coming out fairly soon. But Void Bastards gets an A. And last but not least is a bit of a different one. This is I guess I should tell you the name of it. It's Wildermyth. It's a 2019 game by World Walker Games. And this is basically, if you want to play D&D, but you don't have friends to play D&D with, this is the game for you. You build up your party, and it does sort of like procedural generated storytelling that works surprisingly well. Like, you'll get different events and your characters will develop in different ways. When you get into combat, it's like a tactical turn-based type of combat, but you're building your characters, you're going through this world and exploring and trying to become heroes. If your run does end, you can have legacy characters who will be characters that you had before, who you can recruit in later games, but it's a pretty interesting one. Personally, I'm just giving it a B because I really appreciate what it's doing. I like that it's different. I think that if this is what you want, a sort of D&D experience on your own, it's pretty cool. I just played for a few hours and then I was like, okay, I get it. I'm gonna move on to the next thing now. So it's getting a B. It's a very solid game, and I think for a different player, it would be like way up there, but for me, it's just like, yeah, this is good. So that is my ranking of all of the roguelite games that I've played. There's probably a bunch more I've played that have roguelite elements, but these are the ones that I think really belong in this category, at least other than the ones that I kind of waffled on while making this video. But let me make this bigger so you can just see all the final rankings here. My 4 S tiers, I feel like Dead Cells and Slay the Spire are really the best in category games. Kingdom New Lands is kind of like a personal, this really appeals to me specific game, but I still definitely recommend it. And Risk of Rain 2, I specifically recommend it if you have friends to play with online. But also, all of the A's are great. Even the B's, I definitely would recommend to you, depending on sort of which particular subgenres you like. And as usual, I've got a pretty even distribution of games here, which it's always kind of like a nice bell curve. I like how it works out like that. But yeah, those are how I rank all of the roguelites I've played. Leave me a comment and let me know what your favorite roguelite games are, if there's any games that are missing from this list that you think I might like to play at some point myself. Let me know. If you want to argue about definitions, I probably won't respond to you, but all comments are good comments. But anyways, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. If you want to see more, check out one of my other ranking videos here. I have a Patreon if you want to support the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.